Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Super Paranormal Chronicles. Today, I'm delighted to have Emma Heard with me. Emma is a blogger and professional writer, and we'll talk more about what she writes about in a minute. Emma, welcome.
Hello, thank you for inviting me on. It's an honour, as always, to be invited on podcasts to talk about strange stuff.
Yeah. And one thing that the listeners will know, Emma and I have been talking for 3 or 4 months, if not longer.
Yes.
Yeah, and to put it into context, to try and nail Emma down is like catching fog with your bare hands. You're a busy lady.
I am, yeah. I've sort of apologised for this. I am difficult to nail down. I'm too busy. There's so much going on in Wiltshire, you see, with all these weird, strange, unusual things going on that I'm off busy doing lots of that. So
Which
at least we're
which
not
is
going to
cool.
run out of things to talk about.
That's very true. And the last time I was in Wiltshire, the wife and I came to the UK just prior to COVID.
Right,
And
okay.
we stayed just outside Stonehenge, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then we spent a couple of days around Wiltshire visiting the chalk courses and stuff like that. So you're born and bred in Wiltshire, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm actually from London originally. So the story is I went off, I packed my bags and went off travelling around the world when I was 19, much to my mum's disgust. And came back a year and a half later with a boyfriend in tow who was from Salisbury. And I didn't want to go home. So I went down to Salisbury and it was a lovely spring day. Sat and had a beer by the river looking at the cathedral. And still had my rucksack packed. So I was like, I'll just come down here and work. And then I've never left. I've tried, but it was sort of, there's this theory with Wiltshire that it's people end up here and it's like a piece of elastic. You try and leave and it just sort of pulls you back again. And that's happened to me. And now, many, many years later, I've got a life here, a mortgage, family, dogs. I'm not going anywhere, a house. Yeah. So I'm as Wiltshire as they come these days, I guess.
So it's really interesting because when I was a kid living in Lincolnshire, we used to go to Cornwall for holiday,
Yeah.
and we used to drive past Stonehenge.
Yeah.
And I remember it being closer to the road than what it is now, but that road that goes past it is relatively new. It's not brand new, but it's been there a few years. But I remember before that road was there, we're
Yeah.
talking like mid-70s or something.
That's it.
And
And
I
that's
remember actually, go on.
back when you could actually get in and touch the stones as well.
Yes, because I remember stopping there either on the way there or on the way back, and I do remember as a kid walking through the stones of Stonehenge. But now you've got that big rope, and if you go over it, one of those nice volunteers will jump on you.
Yeah, you're in big trouble. I mean, actually, I should just flag up to anyone that comes to visit Wiltshire. If you happen to come here and it coincides with the solstices or the equinoxes, then because it's seen as a sort of spiritual and religious place, you can go up and you are within the stones and you can give them a hug and everything. So, and I think you can as well, if you've got a bit of cash spare, you can do like an early morning tour and go into the stones. But yeah, as a general rule, it's too busy there now. If everyone was allowed in them at all times, there'd be nothing left of them. So
That's true, yeah, and you'd have all the grass would be destroyed, and
yeah,
it would be like soil paths through the stones, and it wouldn't be half as appealing, I don't think.
that's it. I think it needs to be admired from afar mainly. But I have been lucky enough to I've been to the summer solstice, but I prefer the winter one actually. So you go up there and you can really get up close, and that's a really nice event to go to. Although they get busier every year, so you have to get up even earlier to get there for the sunrise.
Yeah, yeah, that wouldn't be me. It'd be like, oh, I've missed it. Okay,
I
is
have
the
done
bar
that
open?
before.
Yeah.
I've literally been running along the road to the stones as the sun's like, I've heard all the music of that because you get stuck in traffic at like 6 a.m. trying to get there. So
That's crazy. So let's talk about Stonehenge.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a tourist trap that anybody that comes to the UK, it's kind of on their bucket list.
yeah. I mean,
So
yeah. Sorry, go on.
yeah, I'm always being interrupted by women. Don't worry about it. The wife does it all the time.
Sorry.
so, so that's okay. So yeah, that was one of the things that she wanted to go and visit. So it's quite funny how we arrived in London early on the Tuesday or Wednesday morning, about 7 a.m., threw our suitcases into the storage, jumped onto the tube to go to London, and did a walking day around London, and then drove to Wiltshire at night, and then did Stonehenge the next day. So
Okay.
it's completely shrouded in mystery. Nobody really knows how it got constructed, what it's for. So can you enlighten us a little bit of what we do know about Stonehenge?
Well, I'm no historian, and so when I sort of relate the story, the history side of Stonehenge, it's difficult for us to say truly what it is there for. I mean, it's been there. They say built between 2000 and 3000 BC, so a very very long time. The stones, that's again the research changes, but the blue stones came from a very long way away. The stones that are nearer came from a place called Marlborough. That's still probably 30 miles away. And bear in mind, this was a time when, well, how did you move stones that were like 4 or 5 tons in size? So there's always, I think that's basically in the middle of this open sort of plains as well. There's this big structure with these huge stones that have come from Wales. Other people have said recently Scotland. So, what were the people of that time wanting this for? And I've heard all sorts of theories over time. So, was it astrological? And well, it is, because obviously it aligns with different patterns in the sky of the moon and the stars and the sun. Was it a clock, I suppose, or a calendar? In a way, it would tell you the time of year, because as the sun comes through and hits the heel stone, that would tell you that it's either one of the, sort of midsummer or midwinter. Other wilder theories are it's a landing site for aliens. I'm not sure about that. Someone else said it's to do with human sacrifice. So it's a place where people will have been bought for sacrificial reasons. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I asked my friend who's a professor, Professor Jasper, what he thought the last time we were up there. And I do tend to believe with him that it's actually a huge, massive funeral site, because you've got within 2 miles, you've got 7 archaeological features, and that's not just sort of stones, they're the barrows, so they're the burial mounds. You've got cursuses. Sorry, there's one of those pauses that's hopefully going to get edited out. Various things that are there, and people obviously used it as a big meeting place. But because of all the burials around, it does make me think, was it somewhere that they came to for funerals? And just up the road from Stonehenge, probably about a mile away, is its lesser known Woodhenge partner, which has only really been uncovered and discussed in the last few decades. But they think now that actually maybe that was the place where the summer and the spring solstices were celebrated, but Stonehenge was for autumn and winter. So the light versus the dark, maybe, yeah, that's why Stonehenge is related to this. So that's basically where we're at with Stonehenge. But there's other stuff going on there, like the energies, the ley lines, lots of weird lights in the sky, lots of strange experiences. And there's a lot of people in Wiltshire and the world beyond that believe that there is something going on that we don't understand yet that is creating it as some sort of centre for weird activity. And could these stone circles be at the heart of that?
And that's really cool to know because, yeah, anybody that's born in England or grew up in England knows Stonehenge. Everybody knows that, the summer solstice and the winter solstice, all these people come and celebrate the summer or the winter.
Yeah.
But you mentioned some of the strange occurrences that have been happening. Can you kind of like point to a few of them and explain what kind of things happen?
Yeah, I mean, so we need to split it up into sort of ghostly stuff and UFO and lights in the sky. Now, one thing to point out to people that don't know of it is it sits just on the edge of Salisbury Plain, which is 25 miles long, 10 miles wide, and it's probably one of the biggest sort of military areas in the UK. There's a lot of army bases up there. And so there are lots of strange lights in the sky that occur. And quite often, it's not unusual if you're up on the plains to see flares, which could be mistaken. If you didn't know otherwise, you'd think it was something weird going on. And obviously, there's lots of other activities that go on up there that could explain a lot of the strangeness at Stonehenge. That being said, the army haven't been there forever. In fact, not that long at all. And so these strange reports have been going on many years. And obviously, Stonehenge itself and the other stone circles in Wiltshire have been there for many thousands of years. So it doesn't really explain all of it, but it does explain possibly some of the UFO sightings. But speaking to one of the guides up there, he's called Neolithic One, he's on TikTok, does lots of videos on Stonehenge. You might have come across him. But he was telling me the story, and this was just after COVID. And it was all very quiet up there because there were no visitors allowed. And there was 2 security guards up there one night. And they managed to film, I think it was actually more night, it was early morning, so the sun was starting. And they said whenever they'd witnessed anything going on up there, there's always this sort of electrical buzz in the air. And other security personnel have also said about this weird electrical current and things that go on. Anyway, they were up there early one morning and they saw this shape-shifting balloon with sort of blobs and spikes come across towards the stones. They filmed a bit of it and it was moving, and they thought at first they thought it was some sort of weird balloon. Is it a weather balloon, something like that? And it shifted around and then it shot off in a different direction and then disappeared. And they're used to being up there. So I always think when you've got security guards or army personnel, policemen, people like that, farmers as well, who are telling tales, they tend to be more pragmatic and not as perhaps using their imagination like I might if I saw something.
Yeah.
And they said that was totally unexplained. They sat on the video for a long time because they were feared getting fired from English Heritage. But it has since come out. I did show it at a conference because I was a bit on the shelf with it. Some people said, yeah, no, it looks like some sort of contortion of a weather balloon, but it was an awful lot bigger than that because they saw it with their own eyes. So I don't think that's just one of the most latest stories up there, but that's, like I say, not the only one. If we jump back to the 70s, we can talk a bit about maybe combining. So we're going into the energies of the stones. So a friend of mine believes there's elementals up at Stonehenge. Do you kind of get what I'm talking about if I say elementals? Yeah, so the earth energies.
Yeah.
She says she finds them very strong. She says when she goes up there, and she's a Wiccan and a witch and a psychic artist, she says she goes up there with groups of women and they sit, and she said there's always the hares running around, which there would be because it's open countryside. She said one of them in particular always hops over to her a lot higher than the others. She feels the animals up there are the protectors of the stones. So you've got all the corvids, the crows and the jackdaws and the rooks. You must have seen them when you visited.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And they're all very friendly, and they've all got names like George and Little George and Albie. They sit on anyone that's working up there, they get to know them, and they'll sit on their shoulders and on their arms to chat. But there is this feeling like they come over. I've watched them. They come and check the visitors out. And I'm not saying they're not coming over hoping to get like some food thrown their way. But the idea, a lot of people say that they actually are there to look after the stones, which I think is really cool. And it's again this connection to the earth. So heading back, like I promised at the start of this sentence, we go back to 1971, and I'm going to tell you about the happy campers that were up there. So this is a bit of an unverified story, therefore an urban myth, possibly. There was a group of hippie campers, and this was back in the times when there were no ropes around the stones, so you could just walk up. And they decided to pitch their tents within the stone circle. An intense thunderstorm blew across Salisbury Plain that night, and lightning struck local trees and even the sarsen stones themselves. There was a policeman and a farmer up there who happened to be having a chat. So I'm imagining it's in the evening. And they said an eerie blue light began to illuminate the stone circle, so intense that they had to look away. They heard a massive crack. The group of hippies started screaming, and the policeman and the farmer ran to their assistance. But as they got there, all that was left was this smouldering campfire and some sort of smoking tent pegs. Even the tents were gone, and the group of campers were never seen ever again. So, sounds a bit far-fetched. Surely it would have been in the news. I think so. But then again, it lends this idea that if there's a lot of energy up there in the land, and then you get some intense weather coming along, can it create some sort of strange vortex?
That's a good
I'm
point.
always on the fence with these theories because we have got no proof that such a thing exists, but we've also got no proof that it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, so that was one of the events back then. And it also ties in with another weather event, which I'm just going to find. Just bear with me. So, yes, it was Brian Davidson. He was the Inspector of Ancient Monuments at Stonehenge, 1987. He was up there, so it's a few years after the tent story. He took a group of, I think it was University of Bristol students, and they were studying petrological work on the blue stones. And they knew the story of the campers. There was all this, the stones are seen as sacred. So they were joking about their apprehension about taking little bits of them away. And they apparently were joking. So even if people don't see us, God will, and he will strike us down, just like that group of hippies. Anyway, they finished about 9 in the evening, and nothing had happened. Few ought to see it's all a load of rubbish. Anyway, that was the night. You'll remember this. That was the night of the Great Hurricane of 1987 that the Weather Service
Oh, yes.
predicted.
Michael Fish. Yeah. Yeah.
So old Brian Davidson thinks that was caused by this group of students stealing bits of Stonehenge.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go with that. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so we'll go with that. Again, it's all like little stories, little tidbits. If I go back to the earth energy again, and this is back to the lady Nixie I was telling you about, who takes the groups up there. Now, she had a weird experience. It was the summer solstice, and she was up there with a friend of hers, and they were just sitting, looking, enjoying the atmosphere and the party going on, and watching quietly things going around. And she said she got this feeling that someone was around there, and she looked up, and through the crowd she saw this little elf-like figure. She was no higher than a child, had pointy ears, strange clothing, And he just looked around and he was like wandering around the groups. And she said she turned to her friend to say, "Do you see that?" And as she turned back, he'd totally disappeared. And she spent the whole rest of her visit that time looking for this little elf guy, and she couldn't see him. But she's a believer in the fae. And she says sometimes they just present themselves when you least expect it. And again, given the energy that was given off by the crowd there and the summer solstice and everything else, maybe the atmosphere was just right enough for him to like peek out and be shown for just a minute. And I thought that's a really nice little story for
That
Stonehenge.
that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So obviously, not everybody experiences something weird with Stonehenge, but do you find, or have you done research on that more things will happen for the summer solstice or the winter solstice, or is it throughout the year?
Well, it's interesting you say that because actually, before I came along and started digging into this, I've never found anyone that's actually collated all the stories of Stonehenge, be they paranormal or fae or UFO. So they all seem to be scattered throughout the years and throughout time. And I suspect there are a lot more stories out there that I've yet to uncover. I don't think it's any particular time of year, but of course, quite a few of them happen in the late evening or through the night, probably in the witching hour. So, shall I tell you? I mentioned earlier the stories of how if you get somebody from, say, the armed forces telling you they're really practical people, they don't normally believe in ghosts and things like that, and
Yeah,
they are they're made to recount things in a factual way. So this was one of the, it was sent to me by another writer. I'm going to read it out to you. It's MJ Wayland, and she's a paranormal writer, and she hadn't used this story, but she said I could on her behalf. So this is 1972. So it's only a year after the hippies and the vortex situation goes on. So around that time, even though Stonehenge was open to anyone to visit, the army being nearby, they had to keep an eye on the place. So the soldiers would go up there in turn and be on security detail at night. And there was this particular soldier and his colleague were patrolling the area one night. I'd just like to go back and say MJ did say to me, this story was told to her many years after the event by one of the soldiers. And he said to her, "I'm going to tell you a story I don't want you to ever tell anyone else because I'm really still not sure what I saw. I'm embarrassed by it." And unfortunately, he did pass away several years ago. So we have never used names, but we feel like it's okay to recount what happened to him now. So that's where the story came from. This soldier and his colleague were patrolling the area, and they said on this particular night there were some hippies hanging around, but by about 2 a.m. the place was deadly quiet. Both of the soldiers had heard reports earlier in the week of other soldiers on that up there on security detail having seen a white lady gliding through the stones one evening. So they were obviously getting a bit wound up. There's this kind of like, oh, is it happening? But I think they all laughed it off and thought it was all a bit of a wind up. But what happened on this particular night they were there was completely different. So one of the soldiers decided to curl up on their Land Rover, have a little sleep, while the other one stayed on watch. And the sleeping soldier, suddenly awoken by his colleagues shouting at him, and in a sleep-filled daze, he realised that he was actually couldn't feel the cold metal roof beneath him. He was actually levitating or floating above the Land Rover. So at first he thought it was some sort of joke, and he realised it was something far stranger. He was about to shout out, and when he dropped back, boom, straight onto the roof. The two soldiers, like I said, they were so shocked by the whole event. I mean, how do you explain that?
exactly. Yeah, unexplainable, really.
Yeah, levitating. It's
Yeah,
sorry, you either are or you aren't. So yeah, they were really quite shocked by it, and after some discussion they decided to never ever mention it again, and also not to ever nap on duty again at Stonehenge.
yeah. That's punishment for you.
Yeah, that's karma, I guess. So so the story of the white lady floating around up there could well be true. There's been a young boy seen running through the stones. You go up and ask any of the night security guys, they will all tell you of whisperings and noises that come from within the stone circle, and also of this, which I mentioned earlier, this weird electrical buzz that happens. And that's something I've heard about a lot in Wiltshire, going off on a slight tangent. I know crop circles. I know there's lots of people raising their eyebrows here. I do too. Most of them are amazing works of art, much hated by the farmers.
For
However,
sure.
yeah, I do know a couple of people that have been studying them for many years and sat for hours in the fields. And a lot of them, some go on around Stonehenge, but they're mainly more towards Avebury way, Warminster way. And sorry, I've lost my tangent there. What was I saying about crop circles? Oh yes, this electrical energy. So they sat around waiting for these crop circles to arrive, and they talk about this weird liminal atmosphere and this buzzing, this sort of electrical buzzing that goes on. So whether that's something that happens elsewhere, I don't know, or whether it's a Wiltshire thing. It
Yeah.
just does seem
Well,
to correlate.
yeah. It's funny that you mention about the whispers, because the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, they had
Yeah.
noise coming from it, and it was the wind blowing through the fences. And it's actually
Okay.
like, yeah. So I'm wondering, with regard to the whispers, if it's the wind blowing through extremely close stones, to cause like a vibration, and that potentially could explain maybe some, but not all, of what people are deciphering as whispers.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear sort of, yes, definitely. I totally agree with you. And certainly fences. So for 30 years, I had horses, and that's another going to be another pressure of my life because it looks like I've just been offered another one to take in. So, yeah, goodbye writing ghost stories and hello mucking out fields again. Um, but I used to have my horse on a piece of land in Wiltshire in a field below the Fovant Downs. And that's, again, it's got a lot of history on that land. So it was, they found sort of Neolithic, Bronze Age sort of stuff on this farmland. But it also used to be where the encampments after World War One, where the Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand armed forces sort of demobbed.
Right.
But the Spanish flu went through these camps. These poor guys, they got survived World War One. They came back before they were sent home, and then the Spanish flu hit them. And apparently, because they were so weak and injured, it wiped a lot of them out. And I didn't know any of this when I had my horse at this particular place, but I used to be down there, and it happened 3 or 4 times. And I would just hear, be down there, it'd be still, and I just hear this noise of, it's quite distinctive, of people having conversations and like
Yeah.
in the background, do you know what I mean? If you can hear like a party going on miles away and it just carries on the wind. And it always reminds me of that. And it was only afterwards I was speaking to a couple of my friends, and I just wondered, I'd just look up and I'd be like, who's that talking? Because there was nothing around there, no one, just me and the horses and dogs. And I always used to think that I was hearing just remains of those, perhaps the soldiers around their campsites and stuff at the end of it. And I just wonder if a lot of people have camped at Stonehenge, maybe it's just this remnants of, well, it's residual energy, isn't it? I
Yeah,
think it's
exactly,
yeah.
yeah. And it's yeah, and if anybody's actually been there, the fact that it's a vast area of grass, trees, or whatever, it wouldn't be at all surprised if during World War One and World War Two that was used as a military, like you say, yeah, the military are there now, but it might go back, yeah, as far World War One, yeah, as an area where people could camp.
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure if there are actually any sort of official camps right near Stonehenge, but like I say, because it's right on the Salisbury Plain,
Yeah.
yeah, they were around. And in fact, that brings me to one of my favourite and probably the biggest and the best ghost story of Stonehenge before we sort of finish with that area. And that's a mysterious phantom plane. So,
Oh
yes. So you don't get many ghost planes, do you?
no,
But
you
Wiltshire,
don't.
I did promise you Wiltshire has it all. So we tick that one. Ghost plane. We've got one of them.
Okay,
We haven't
yeah,
got a ghost
check.
ship actually, but that's mainly because we're landlocked. Probably the only thing. Anyway, so if you do you remember when you visited, did you go past Airman's Cross, which was by the visitor centre? So it was a stone thing not commemorating, but about the death of the two airmen that lost their
We
lives
must we
near
must have
there.
done because I'm ex-military as well, so I would have like read that and go, oh, yeah, connection to the military. So yes,
Right. So, okay. So you probably, if I showed you a picture of it, you'd be like, oh, yes, I remember
yeah,
seeing that.
yeah,
So that
exactly.
originally didn't used to be outside the visitor centre. That was up at somewhere called Airman's Corner. And back in the 70s, which we were talking about earlier, when there was the other road, it was placed next to the other road, which is now been all shut off. Because English Heritage, they will need to make money to pay for their spangly new visitor centre, so they stopped everyone coming around the back way to see the stones for free. Anyway, so originally it was sited on about half a mile away, and it was the site of an early military aviation accident on the 5th of July 1912. So I'll just leave that there. We skip forward to World War Two, and there were soldiers based up there, and they were doing instructional course shortly before D-Day. And it was Sir Michael W.S. Bruce. He was one of the four soldiers, and he wrote this account and sent it to the Evening Standard in 1953 to tell the story. So the soldiers were all up there. They were doing their training and they were heading by jeep towards Stonehenge. And they suddenly witnessed a tiny airplane fly straight above them, over them, into a copse of trees on the side of the road. So they raced ahead to the scene of the crash. And there was literally nothing to be seen. There was no aircraft, there was no noise as this went over, and there was no sign of any accident. And the men were obviously really miffed. Where did this come from? Where did it go? They went off to look through the copsewood, and it was the warrant officer who called to his men. So he was standing, and apparently he was as white as a sheet, at the spot where the plane appeared to disappear. And that's where he came across a large stone which was commemorating the deaths of these two airmen back in 1912, the spot where the plane actually went down.
That's
So I
pretty
was like,
cool.
that's, yeah. See, that's kind of, yeah, they're the ones that I find quite hard to discount. If four soldiers saw a ghost plane and it landed there, and it's where there had been a previous accident.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of like a jaw-dropping moment. It's like, okay, for you skeptics, yeah, debunk that.
Yeah, I will say this. When I was doing research for it, and I did find a photo of the original crash in 1912, it was in a field, and it is quite open there. There probably were trees, a lot more trees many years ago, but now it's all farmland. And I did wonder how quickly between 1912 and 19 the start of, well, just before D-Day 44, how quickly a copse of trees could grow up around that site. So that sort of has put a doubt in my mind, but equally There could have been trees there, or it could have been trees in front of the site of the field. So it's
That's
not
it.
beyond
Yeah.
the realms of a
No, no. It's just one of those other mysteries that we're never going to get to the bottom of.
I mean, isn't that the joy of ghost stories, though, is that you never really
Absolutely.
truly know?
Absolutely. So I know that, Wiltshire and Stonehenge are probably, or Stonehenge in Wiltshire is probably the most famous. But I know Wiltshire is also famous for, a few other circles and a few other iconic locations, such as the chalk horses and stuff like that. So I know that you haven't really specialised in some of the others, but do you know why, for example, the chalk horses exist? Because we actually managed to walk to one from where we were staying, and we
Yeah,
actually managed to walk to the top of it and look down at it from the hill.
yeah.
So those kind of fascinate people, I think, as much as what Stonehenge does. So can you enlighten us a little bit more about those?
Okay, which one? Just out of curiosity, do you remember which one it was?
It it wasn't far from Stonehenge, and I'm trying to think of the location that we stayed at. It was
Westbury?
about, yes, I think
Yeah,
it might
that's
have
the
been,
big one. Yeah,
yes, yeah, on the hillside.
yeah, it's really well known. And actually, so I think there's various sort of ideas behind the stone horses, but curiously, a lot of them are not quite as old as we previously thought. Like, I think the
Okay,
Westbury one, the one that you see now, which looks more like a horse, was recarved in the time of Charles II. But
okay,
before that, it was more elongated, so maybe more of a dragon shape. I think there's Now, I'm not going to put facts out there, but I think there's 7 in Wiltshire. But maybe that they know about something like 13, but they're not all sort of still showing.
yeah, yeah,
Why were they there? Well, celebration maybe of animals as a marking point. I wouldn't really want to speculate, but I do know that I went up to have an investigation of the one at Uffington, which is right up in the north of Wiltshire. And in fact, it's kind of the Oxfordshire borders. And they think that's one of the oldest ones. And it does look a bit like a dragon as well, as opposed to
okay,
a horse. And it's been carved into the landscape. And one of the theories I did find on that was that actually the area there was known as somewhere that the families that lived there, they bred horses. So
right, right.
was it almost like a marker for what they were up to? And there's lots
This
of
is
myths.
my farm. You see,
Yeah, by here.
yeah,
I suppose, yeah, you haven't got a massive billboards like we have now. So you had to do something special.
yeah.
And
So
interestingly, that's the Uffington one looks down on something called Dragon's Hill, which is where
right.
one of the St. George was supposed to have slain a dragon. And
Oh, okay.
it's flat
That
and nothing grows on it. And that's because the blood of the dragon seeped into the hill and poisoned it forevermore.
I have learnt something today. I've learnt something today. Because it's that one where, like I say, there's like a track at the top where you can actually look down from it from the top of the hill. But we
Yeah,
actually got a better picture having left that and driving back towards Westbury,
yeah.
where you've got perfect views of it on the hill. So we actually pulled into a pub car park and we were taking perfect pictures of it from there rather than looking down at it from the hill.
Yeah, I know. I think in Wiltshire we're quite keen on carving things into hillsides because when I was telling you earlier about where my horse was kept and the whispering on the wind, that's below something called the Fotham Badges. And that's,
Yes,
did you
all the
visit that
military
when the
badges.
military badges were
Yes,
carved in?
yeah, yeah, I
Okay, well,
saw that.
that's the
Yeah,
site where those soldiers were demobbed. And while they were there, they carved their emblems of their regiments, I think they're
yeah,
called, into the hillside. A friend of mine was apparently driving through Wiltshire just the other day and sent me a photo, and he said, "Oh, it looks like the Warminster thing has been commemorated in chalk on one of the hillsides." Warminster thing being this big UFO phenomenon that went on in the 60s and 70s that got everyone very excited. Anyway, it's not actually the Warminster thing. I looked it up. It's another of these sort of regimental emblems, because the regiment, the army is all over the place in Wiltshire, and not just the army, the RAF as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's funny that you should mention the Warminster thing, because that was
Yes.
that was the first article that I read from yourself that I thought I need to get Emma on my podcast. So I know it was a year or so ago that you actually wrote the article. 2024, was it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, at least
Yeah.
that.
So I hope I don't have to rack your memory too much, but can you go into a little bit more detail about the Warminster thing?
Yeah, so Warminster's a little, I'm not even sure it's really a market town, but it is. It's a little town in West Wiltshire, really sleepy, not a lot going on. It does have army bases around it, which is interesting. I'll come to that later. But in the late 60s, I think it was 67, it all started. It all started on Christmas Day morning when this poor lady came out of her house and was trotting off to the morning church service, and she got this audio experience. She said it sounded like someone was almost scratching up the road with a tractor, but like above her head, incredibly loud sort of noise. And I think she might have had a bit of a funny turn. Anyway, she got to the church and explained all. And this particular event, they don't know where this noise came from. She couldn't describe what it was, but it kicked off a series of strange audio phenomenon and lights seen in the sky that eventually, there was a particular journalist who started to document it, and I think in the end they had over 1,000 different accounts going on of these weird noises, lights appearing in the sky, and so on. Now, he was a local journalist, and he decided, well, his luck was in it. It was like the scoop of the century. So he started writing about it, and eventually it hit the national news. And I think in the sort of 60s and 70s, people were moving about a bit more, cars were more readily available, and people started to flood to Wiltshire at the weekends to do something called sky watching, which I think is a phrase that ufologists still use now, but I think it's
Yeah.
really started then. And they'd sit on these particular, Cradle Hill was the big one. And they would literally come out there for the whole weekend, and there was this sort of camaraderie and this thing that we're going to find out if there is life coming from other planets. And there are so many accounts from that time, including strange spiraling lights in the sky, objects coming in and then doing right angles, moving other ways. And we have to remember that this being near Army land, a lot of them could be contributed. Now, Arthur Shuttleworth, who was the journalist, he did contact the Army on several occasions to say, "We spotted this last night. Could it have been this?" And they were like, "No, there was nothing going on at that time." And even some of the guys in the Army had their own, like, they saw strange things as well, triangular shapes with lights on. But while all this was going on, there's a few local pranksters who decided they were going to try and, I don't know, one of them, he said he was interested in human psychology, and if he made something up about a large sonic bang going and then all pigeons falling out of the sky, would people believe it? Well, with all these other stories going on, they of course did, but he later admitted that part of it was made up. There's an infamous photo which really does look like your classic sort of silver saucer frisbee going through the
Right.
air. I think it was in the Haunted magazine article. And to this day, the two guys who were there when it happened, apparently one claims he's still like, no, 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 this wasn't a hoax. I happened to get a photo. And the other guy was like, no, it was all made up. He just wanted the attention. So I don't know if there's some sour grapes going on. I think only one of the guys is still alive now. So anyway, this carried on and literally into the 70s. There were still people up there, 1971, 72, coming for the whole weekend. It got debated in national newspapers. There were town hall meetings. Arthur Shuttleworth wrote 3 books on it, and he continued to log it. But eventually, over time, the sightings sort of died down, and so did the whole furore, and it was sort of largely forgotten. And then there were some groups, because people are just as strange as things from outer space, aren't they? Arguing about certain accounts, and it all got a bit toxic. But anyway, Warminster, then it's sort of all gone quiet. The craze was over. And do you know, I was here doing Weird Wiltshire probably for 2 or 3 years before I even knew of it myself. It was literally completely off the radar. And I was like, how have thousands of accounts of lights in the sky and UFO sightings not been sort of, how have they been forgotten? And they haven't by the town. They've got a great mural of its time. And my friend thought they were carving sort of chalk figures in the hills, but like I say, it wasn't. So, and I just wanted to write that article about it to make sure it's kept alive.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, actually, I managed to get in touch with Steve Dewey. He's one of the he calls himself an old timer. And he's one of the original Skywatchers from up there in the early 70s. Wow. And they still go up there on bank holiday, like the bank holiday, August bank holiday weekend on the Saturday night. They still go up there and they take their chairs and they do a bit of sky watching. So last year I went and joined them. And I did see lots of lights from the army. They said they think they don't like us being up there, so they put all their floodlights on.
Yeah.
Can't see much. We did walk out in the opposite direction, hung around, had some cool conversations for a while, and then by about midnight it clouded over and started raining. So I was like, you know what? Thanks, guys. But I'm not hardcore enough Skywatcher for this, and I headed home. But it's nice to think they still go up there, you know, and meet up.
Oh, yeah. And being ex-military myself, I completely understand how they like. Yeah, we don't want anybody to see what we're doing, even though we're not doing much. So we're going to put all the floodlights on, all the spotlights, just to obstruct people's vision. Yeah.
And the military police occasionally like cruise by slowly, like as if to say, yeah, we're keeping an eye on you.
Yeah.
Like, the mean age of everyone here is like 70 to 80. What are we going to be doing? But actually,
you're in bed by 7 p.m.
I did say, why to one of them, what's your theory on why Warminster, if these visitors were coming in at this time, why was Warminster the hotspot? And it kind of tallies with a lot of other stuff at the moment, is they're coming to check out what they know that this is a big military area, so they're coming to see what we're up to, what's going on up there. And I guess there's more lights in the sky and things like that. Are they attracted to those activities?
That could be
it's a good
explanation. It is, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, Emma, I know that I have a few other subjects, but unfortunately we are coming close. So what's next on the agenda for Emma Heard?
I've got a couple of talks coming up in the autumn, but at the moment I think my main thing is to just I always say I write about Wiltshire and the world beyond. I keep getting distracted by other stories in other areas. So my last blog was the Bermuda Triangle, which has fascinated me since I was a kid.
But that's just down the road from Wiltshire.
Yeah,
just
I
down
know.
the road from Wiltshire.
Like, a pair of binoculars, you can see it, you know. But I get attracted by like a magpie by like shiny stories of weirdness elsewhere, and I go off on
I, I
tangents.
I'm not saying
Um,
anything.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm allowed. So anyway, I've got to get my eye back on the game for some more Wiltshire stories. And what am I going to cover next? I don't know. I think this summer I want to go to the Rifles Museum in Salisbury, which is in the Cathedral Close. So there's supposed to be a lot going on there, and prepare for this talk. And I've also, at the moment, I'm doing, and you heard it here first, I'm going to call it the Wiltshire Ghost Directory. It's not going to be probably for publication, but I'm aiming to as my sort of life legacy, because people don't like publishing books anymore. So I'm going to leave this to the Wiltshire Museum. Hopefully, a directory of every single ghost story I ever come across and my time up to now and going forwards in Wiltshire, so that in the future, if there's ever another Emma comes along, she can pick this up and say, hey, look at all these stories. I'm so glad someone put them all in one place. So
That
that's what I'm
is
doing.
a great idea, and it's really weird how, like I said at the beginning, that I'm from Lincolnshire originally. Ever since I started doing what I'm doing now, I've tried to find more ghost stories or even investigation teams in Lincolnshire, and it's like
Yeah.
you can find tidbits, but you
Yeah.
can't find anything substantive. So if you get bored of Wiltshire, Lincolnshire's not far. Crack on and
Okay.
let me know.
Well,
Yeah,
it is up the
that'll
road
be
compared to where you are now, but maybe that's a project for you to come across. Maybe there's a ghostly person in every county that should be making a directory, because it's a social history, really, if nothing else.
this is true. We'll do it between us, okay?
All
You
right.
can be my UK correspondent.
Okay.
Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've learned loads about Stonehenge that I didn't know before.
Oh,
I
thank
thank you for your
you.
time. It has been an absolute pleasure trying to kind of tie you down after all this amount, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No,
so
thank you. It's lovely. I always really love people inviting me on to have a chat, and that's how we make new friends and we get to find out more. And thanks again for having me on today.
you're most welcome. You have a great rest of the day, and I'm going to go out and get sunburned.
Okay,
Thanks very
bye.
much. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.